Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the GB3 Podcast, part of the DNA Digital Network. So now, not only you'll be able to find this podcast on YouTube, but now, thanks to DNA, you'll be able to find it on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and other places that podcasts are available. Now you can listen to this program on your favorite audio device. For more details, check out DNADigitalNetwork.com. This is the GB3 Podcast. I am one half of your dynamic duo, the Reel Geno Reynolds.
And I am Bill, HeiseNerd Fields. Gino, what's happening tonight, man?
Oh, not much. I just got back. Before we record this, I just got back from seeing Midnight Sun, which I wasn't really looking forward to, but here's the thing. It wasn't the worst thing I ever seen, which really surprised me. But that being said, I still had to sit through a not Nicholas Sparks type movie, so that's never fun, even if they're kind of good. So.
That's okay. I was getting ready to lay down my latest episode of my Crystallis run through, and just realized that the last time that I played, I had my mic muted.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, so I'm probably gonna. Well, actually, I had 2 sessions recorded that I had forgot to turn the mic on, so I'm probably gonna have to just let it ride and move on to the next one. But that's okay.
Something like that. I mean, I didn't. I had the mic on it. I was doing my my Geno's Bad at Games segment, playing Max Payne 3, and I went through one of the hardest levels, and I go to edit, and somehow the file got corrupted.
Oh no!
And I had played for like an hour, and it's like, no, I got to do this again. I was so sad. I almost cried. I did not want to. I did not want to go through that level again. So when I went through that level the second time, you better believe I put the fear of God into those bad guys.
Nice.
Let's just say a lot of extra bullets were spent taking out my frustrations.
Nice.
All right, man. So in the program today, we're gonna do our small segments, and then later we got a bit of a surprise. Bill, you have a little game for us to play, so we'll just tease it with that.
Yeah,
but we're going to start with our short stories here first. The first thing, and they actually kind of they kind of connect in a way. The first story I have is about Netflix and awards. It come out that last year, French filmmakers were mad that a couple of Netflix films were up for awards at the Cannes Film Festival. So now the Cannes Film Festival will not allow Netflix movies to compete for awards. They are allowed to show their movies at the festival, but they can't win. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the award's name because I will mess it up. Long story short, the board of the Cannes Film Festival said in a statement, any film that wishes to compete in competition at Cannes will have to commit itself to being distributed in French movie theaters. The head of the festival said he thought the decision would coax Netflix into releasing its films in theaters. He said, last year when we selected these 2 films, I thought I could convince Netflix to release them in cinemas. I was presumptuous. They refused. He said he allowed those films into the festival because he welcomed the new energy and did not want the films to go to other festivals. Now that's a French festival, which I know a lot of Hollywood cares about Cannes, and sometimes some cool movies have come out of there. But what about us here in the United States? Well, Steven Spielberg had something to say about that. Netflix films, they're just TV movies, according to him. Quote, you certainly, if it's a good show, deserve an Emmy, but not an Oscar. I don't believe the films that are just given token qualifications in a couple of theaters for less than a week should qualify for Academy Awards nomination. Though Spielberg doesn't think Netflix movies deserve to win Oscars, he clearly recognizes that the company is making the kinds of films traditional studios tend not to produce anymore, and he's criticizing the establishment he's been a part of for its unwillingness to take risks on properties that aren't brand names. So this reminds me of something, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about when I say the word Napster.
Oh, yes.
This reminds me of Hollywood is basically seems like they're the music industry.
Yep.
Trying to fight back this new thing. Even though Netflix has been around a long time, they haven't really been making movies for a long time or producing movies and shows. Do you think his opinion is wrong? Do you think it's out of touch? Does he have a point? Let me get your thoughts on this. What do you think of Spielberg saying they don't deserve to win awards? And I know I don't have the greatest thoughts about the Oscars, but I want to hear your thoughts about what he had to say about that.
I don't know. I'm in a little bit in disagreement here because if they're if they're eligible to win things like Emmys and they're eligible to win Golden Globes for the TV series, why are they not allowed to let these films get the same treatment? I just think that if these filmmakers are putting just as much, into their films, okay, here's a prime example was the Cloverfield Paradox. That's a movie that was ready to probably get put in a theater, and Netflix scooped it up. I'm not saying that a movie like that is going to be an Oscar-worthy movie, but the point is that sometimes a movie gets enough put into it to be, theater ready. They just happen to be using this as a different vehicle to get it out and distributed. And honestly, they can get a bit broader audience because of the fact that most people have Netflix. They don't have to pay to go to a movie theater or make their way out to a movie theater. I just think that the times are going to be a-changing, is as they say.
Well, a little side note, the Cloverfield Paradox was supposed to go to movie theaters, but then I think, I believe it was Paramount that was producing it, said they didn't think it was going to do well, so they sold it to Netflix.
Sure.
Which honestly was probably the best plan they could have ever thought of, because the second Cloverfield movie is still the only one I really liked. The first one I wasn't a big fan of. But
let me ask you on a side note.
Go right ahead.
Would your reasoning for that second one really lie in John Goodman?
Just the idea of it, the ending kind of threw me off a little bit, and I know this is a big spoiler, but the movie's been out for a while, so be it. I like the fact that even though the ending was kind of weird with the whole alien thing, I like the fact that even though he didn't know he was right, he was right. John Goodman's character, about there being something going on. John Goodman definitely, I won't say he carried that movie because the other performances were good too. But if John Goodman wouldn't have been in it, I don't know if it would have been as strong. But I like the claustrophobia of that movie.
Yeah.
That, you're trapped behind two locked doors and a flight of stairs, and you think the world's ending outside, but you're in there with a madman. So do you take the chance? I like that premise where the first movie was, the first movie, I get what they were doing, but the hype was bigger than the product. And then the third one was just kind of a mess. The Paradox thing was just kind of a mess. It was just trying to explain, here's how everything happened, and now all the movies from now on are supposed to be in different time periods, because I guess this next one they're talking about coming out with is supposed to be like in World War II.
Interesting.
But this thing that happened in the Paradox movie is what's supposed to have caused it. And it's kind of it was too much of a catch-all for me. But getting back to Spielberg, okay, he's saying that they should be up for awards, it just shouldn't be Oscars. So it sounds like he's saying that the movies that they produce and make should only be up for made-for-TV movie categories.
Oh, okay.
I guess is what he's saying, because they have Emmys for made-for-TV movies,
right?
And they have Golden Globes for some made-for-TV stuff, and that's what he's saying. He's saying that it's almost like they don't. He says they deserve an Emmy, but not an Oscar, and that's part of his quote. So it's almost like he's saying that Netflix movies aren't good enough to win Oscars. They don't deserve it. He said the word deserve.
Yeah, and that's a little harsh.
And I know that the stuff that they've come out with so far, the stuff that I've seen anyway, and when you've suffered through like the Adam Sandler movies that they've made and things like that, I'm not saying they haven't made some good movies. I didn't hate Bright. It wasn't great. It was a kind of a 90s throwback for me, and I liked the idea. It wasn't a great movie, but I enjoyed it. It's not going to win an Oscar, though. Fairy Lives Matter jokes just didn't fly, right? But I like some of the stuff they've done. Their TV shows are definitely better than their movies as of right
absolutely.
now. And of course, some of them have been up for and won some awards. But if they get to a point where they're making movies that contend with Hollywood, I don't care how they're distributed just because they didn't go to a theater. I mean, they do release some of their stuff in theater. Like he said, they release it for a couple days or whatever. I've seen they did that with Bright. It was in a theater up north in Chicago for like 2 days or something like that, whenever before they released it on Netflix. I don't think they were doing it for awards contention, but they were just doing it just to put it out there because it was Will Smith, I think. But do you think that he shouldn't be able to say they deserve? Do you think is he just out of touch? I guess is maybe where I'm coming from this, because it almost feels like just like the movie studio or just like the record studios were fighting digital distribution. Oh, you need to have it on CD because we make it and we make all the money. That's kind of where it's going, right? But it seems, but this is coming from a director who is making art. But do you think it's like, do you think he's out of touch and he just doesn't want to embrace the future? That's, I guess, what I'm asking.
I think that might be a little bit of it. I guess one concern is, though, if these are qualifying for things like Oscars, then what of these like made-for-TV movie categories that are already out there? I mean, technically they're along the same levels if the TV shows from Netflix compete on the same level. So it's kind of like, okay, should the made-for-TV films that are on like network television get qualify for Oscars too? I mean, I'm okay with that. It's just you had to think of it on that level too. But I mean, like I said, I think times are changing. I think that we're going to see new ways for films to be distributed. I don't think the movie theaters are going to be going anywhere right away. I just think that we're going to see different options in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I think within the next 10 years, I mean, especially with as much money as Netflix has spent on some of this stuff, I think within the next 10 years, they are still going to have theaters, but theaters are going to have to change. I mean, because I think that with the money they're spending, it may not be Netflix, because I have a feeling that with everyone coming out with their own streaming services, eventually they're going to abandon Netflix, or at least I don't know if Netflix will become powerful enough with their own stuff that they're going to survive, because you think about it, Marvel's not going to start any new shows with them anytime soon.
Oh no.
They'll get to keep the ones they've got, but those aren't going to go forever. Nope. I don't know how much they're willing to pay for something that would win an Oscar. That being said, if they make something good enough that is better than some of the stuff that comes out in Hollywood, I don't care where it comes from. But in the next 10 years, I think that movie studios are, just like the record studios had to do, they're going to have to embrace this, because people are going to get tired of paying higher ticket prices. I mean, things like MoviePass are keeping it down for right now, but, that's not going to last forever, especially if movie studios see that, well, if we have our own streaming service, we can just release it to there. People want to watch it at home, they'll pay, this much per month or whatever to see the new movie. Or I don't know if they're going to be able to do it by movie basis. They would almost have to get into the streaming service or make a deal with someone like a Netflix or an Amazon. I can honestly see Amazon maybe being the winner in the streaming service war, because all the money they have.
Oh yeah.
I think they'll be able to outplay Netflix when it comes to money. But I think this is where it's going. It's not going to be next year. And our theater's going to go away? No, but Hollywood is getting younger. The old guard, just look at the Oscars. They're criticized for being old in the last however many years.
Yep.
Hollywood's getting old, and they're going to have to embrace the future if they want to keep making this thing. I could see definitely like Disney with their streaming service all of a sudden going, we have this Disney exclusive movie, in the Marvel universe eventually.
Oh,
something like that. Imagine how much that's going to change the industry when they finally decide on their streaming service, because they're talking about doing original movies on there anyway.
Right.
Right from the get-go. I mean, granted, one of the ones they have announced is the 57th version of The Parent Trap, but they're talking about doing original movies, which that's a fantastic idea. Do I want to see movie theaters go? No, because I don't have a huge screen like that to watch my movies on. But
absolutely.
But so I don't think movie theaters will go away in the next year. But in the next decade, you just never know.
Yep. And well, I guess speaking of streaming movies on Netflix, we can move on to my category. So on a article on Polygon, I read that Netflix is actually starting both a animated series and a live action film of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. I'm actually kind of intrigued by this. I think that it's an interesting franchise. Let me pull up the details here. That the actress is Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin. I'm guessing she's playing Carmen Sandiego. There really isn't like a writer or director tied to it yet.
I believe I saw somewhere that she is playing that part.
Right. I'm intrigued to see which direction they go with. I kind of like to see, because most other formats have kind of been like from the eyes of the detective. I almost would like to see a film that's through the eyes of Carmen Sandiego herself, and her kind of just ducking the law enforcement, and it's a big heist film kind of thing. I think that would be kind of cool. Like almost like a heist film meets Indiana Jones type sort of film. What are your thoughts, Gino?
Well, when it comes to Carmen Sandiego, growing up, I didn't have a ton of interaction with Carmen Sandiego. I did play a few of the games. Can never beat her. I got to her in the first one, and I could never win. She'd always get away from me. And then I did watch the Fox cartoon back in the day.
PBS game show?
No, I never did watch it. I mean,
man.
Don't get me wrong. I knew the theme song and everything, but no, I never really watched it. And as a weird mid high schooler, I did have a weird cartoon crush on Carmen Sandiego, but we'll just move on from that.
Come on now, every kid did.
But I'm not sure where they're going to go with this. I have a feeling it's going to be where they follow her more, which jokingly I'd say, well, if you're following the whole time, you would know where Carmen Sandiego was the whole time.
Oh, yeah, yes.
But it makes me wonder. I mean, you have a good point. I have in my notes that is it going to be like something like an Ocean's 11, something like that, where it's focusing on her capers, instead of, the detectives, which is, like you said, what everyone kind of did. Especially like the cartoon. I mean, she was the villain, but even though she kind of helped him out every now and then. But it makes me wonder, what new things can they do? Is something like technology going to help or hamper this? I mean, because if you think about, stuff from the 90s or something like that, I'll use like The Usual Suspects for an example. The Usual Suspects would have been over in about 10 minutes with the internet.
Right.
So, I mean, I could see them, up in the ante of the technology, maybe making it more like futuristic than what we have now, to where that's how she can evade kind of things. Are they going to kind of I don't want to see them make Carmen Sandiego the good guy.
Right. Like anti-hero, maybe.
I mean, yeah, Carmen Sandiego, well, that's just it. I mean, I still want her to be the bad guy, but she can have the bad guy with the heart of gold kind of feel to it, and I'd be okay with that. But I don't want to see all of a sudden, well, Carmen Sandiego was caught, and all of a sudden now she's working with the detective. No, I don't want to see that.
No, none of that.
And then there hasn't been much released about this, but it makes me wonder what age group they're going to go for. Is the live? I mean, I'm going to guess probably the movie will probably be PG-13. I'm not sure about the cartoon. I mean, it could be for younger kids. Netflix might be trying to kind of cover the whole bases, but
right.
I'm curious about your thoughts where you think they're going to take it.
I think that it'll be, I think, like I said, it's going to be more family friendly. Like I said, a PG-13 would make sense for the live action film. And interestingly enough, my experience with the games, I was terrible at Where in the World and really bad at Where in Time as Carmen Sandiego, but I had like Where in the USA down. Like I was really good with that one. My USA geography was much better than the other stuff. So, but I'm intrigued. Like I said, I think that, they're going to have to update it Because, like, yeah, things like GPS and internet and cell phone technology are going to make things way easier for, you know, the detectives to find her and stuff like that, unless she's, like, a really skilled hacker or has a skilled hacker on her team and stuff like that. I don't know. I think it'll be an intriguing franchise for Netflix to have picked up, and it's going to be one of those things that I think that whenever nostalgia is in play with Netflix, it seems to be like gangbusters. They just get all kinds of views. So I'm intrigued to see where this goes.
You know, it's funny. I was watching and I'll say in preparation, but I was just kind of goofing off watching YouTube videos. A Carmen Sandiego video popped up. It was about a guy that, I found this by accident. It was about a guy that was trying to preserve the history of games, and they followed him. I believe it was on the Vice channel, and he found a game called Where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego. I guess it's one of the rarest games.
Fargo.
Ever. Yeah,
the answer is Fargo.
But he goes. I wouldn't even have known that existed until I went to North Dakota and got all these books and actually found a copy of the game and everything. So I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, you know, I could see this being a series for Netflix, a series of movies, like maybe 3 movies. Because of course everything still feels like it has to be a trilogy nowadays.
Right.
I could see it because, I mean, Carmen Sandiego, especially in like the Fox cartoon, I mean, it was sequel bait the entire time. I mean, of course, you know, they think they've got her. They're not, you know, and then of course she gets away in the end. Go to part 2, you know. So I could see this being a fun. It can't take itself too seriously. That would ruin it. You know, if they all of a sudden it was Carmen Sandiego but gritty. You know, I don't want to see, you know, where, you know, let's catch a murderer Carmen Sandiego. You know, it should be fun capers. I can see it, like I said, I can see it being something like an Ocean's 11. You know, but, you know, follow Carmen Sandiego and her crew, and I'm sure she'll have a quirky crew, you know.
Oh, yes.
Because I think the games had some weird named guys, too. I don't remember it too well.
Right, they did.
I could see it doing something like that. And really that, in my last thought of that actually intrigues me. I like this idea. I'm afraid of this idea, but then again, I don't have a huge connection to it as a kid, that if they mess it up, I'm not going to be too angry, but I will say I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be just nostalgic enough to pull people in, and I think that they'll put their own spin on it, and I think it'll be a success in the end. So guess we'll find out when it happens.
All right, man. So, you know, you've been teasing me with this for a week or so. I'm curious. Okay, it's game time. I know you've got something for me. I'm a little scared, but we're gonna have fun here. So why don't you tell everybody what you've been cooking up for us to do on the show today?
All right, so tonight for our main topic, we are going to be playing a little game I like to call Wheel of Nostalgia.
Oh, God.
I've created a virtual wheel here of about 22 categories, ranging from broad topics to certainly specific topics. We may not get through all these tonight just based on how long we talk about each one of these. But the rules are we're going to talk on a nostalgic level about these particular topics. Any specific memories that we have, things we liked about these things. And the main rule also is that it has to be something that is at least 20 years old. So back from our teenage and childhood years, because it would just make the most sense for, a game called Wheel of Nostalgia to do that. So I'm going to start by spinning the wheel. We're going to each take a few minutes to talk about the topics, and discuss. I'm going to go first on this first one. So, Gino's kind of broken in here and we'll go from there. So let's give this thing a spinny.
I can't wait to embarrass myself.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so this is a specific topic, and the first topic is Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh, nice.
All right, so I thought that this would be a good topic just because any kid that grew up in the 80s and 90s, I mean, even now, but even more so then, we're kind of attuned to Weird Al. My first memories is that we just happened to have, somebody had bought, I don't know if it was as a gag gift, bought it for my parents, the Greatest Hits album from the 80s. And I didn't know until later that this dude was a parody artist, because the music that he was parodying was more pop tune stuff, nothing that my parents really listened to that much when I was a kid. It wasn't until like the 90s that I kind of caught on, when he did like Smells Like Nirvana, that he was actually a parody artist. And just different things. I loved Al TV when he would take over MTV and do his videos. Those were awesome. And I also particularly liked, and even though I didn't watch it until quite a bit later, I was like a teenager, but I finally saw UHF, and that's a fantastic movie. I just also love the fact that he's as versatile as he is now. Like, he's still relevant and still like actually entertaining now, even though he's been around for as long as he has. What are some thoughts on Weird Al for you, Gino?
Oh boy, Weird Al. You couldn't have started on a better subject. I have been a Weird Al fan for as long as I can remember. Right now I own every album, and I mean every album. I won't say I have them on record, but at least digitally I have everything now. My earliest memories of Weird Al would be, back from the days of Eat It. I remember watching a TV special. I don't remember who ran it. It was but it was back, whenever it was you just had ABC, CBS, and NBC. I don't even know if Fox was around at the time. They did a TV special where he went to go. It was it was all acting, but it was where he was going to ask Michael Jackson if he could do a parody of his song. So that was always a big memory for me. Of course, another huge memory for me was Transformers the movie, when they played Dare to Be Stupid on the junk planet. I remember when I saw that in the theater, I got so excited because I know who that is. Just Weird Al for me has always been a constant. If I'm down, I can listen to it and feel better type music, because I know if I'm not in the mood for a parody song, he even does original songs that are just some of the goofiest things I've ever heard and can put a smile on my face. I can annoy people with the song Albuquerque that goes long and long, long, and I love every second of it. Or you can play whatever the drive-through song.
He's trapped in the drive-through.
Yeah,
his long-form stuff is just great.
And you can just annoy somebody with that and know you're getting the better of them. And I love. I've seen him in concert, and you mentioned Al TV. A fun note is they use clips from Al TV and other things when he's doing costume changes at concerts. So you're not just having to wait for him to put on put on a costume. He's doing his costume changes, and you're getting to watch some funny stuff from the past. You mentioned how relevant he still is. I've introduced my kids to Weird Al. First my son was into dinosaurs, so we listened to the Jurassic Park song I don't know how many times. And one son who was into Barney would say, "Oh, it's." He's mentioning Barney. It's like, well, I'm not going to show you the video because the T-Rex is biting on Barney's head or whatever. Yeah. But then my son watches like Disney stuff like Milo Murphy's Law, and Weird Al does the voice of the main character of that. And so we'll be listening to a song, and my son will get a funny look on his face, and I'll be like, "You recognize that voice, don't you?" Uh-huh. It's like, sounds like Milo Murphy, doesn't it? Uh-huh. And he gets all excited, and that got him into Weird Al's music. So I love the fact that something that resonated with me for pretty much as long as I can remember, someone that's been able to, he's so versatile, he can stay relevant. He embraced the internet whenever, and YouTube and things like that. He's one of those artists that is always going to change with the times, always be relevant in the times, and will forever be remembered. When he finally hangs up the accordion, he's going to be remembered for being probably one of the most versatile artists of all time.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever see him live?
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned I saw him live, and they do the costume changes.
Yep, I saw him on the Alapalooza tour, so...
Yeah, I got to see him. It's the State Farm Center now, but the Assembly Hall in Champaign, and still one of the best concerts I ever went to. My wife at the time, she was one of those people that got annoyed by Albuquerque when he played it live.
Yeah.
And I loved every second of it. So it was not her annoyance. I kind of do now.
My favorite part of that song is when he's in the donut shop and he goes through all the kinds and they say, "No, we don't have any of those."
What about this? Let me check. No. Yeah, it's so odd and just weird and good, and then of course the whole point of the song is he hates sauerkraut.
Yes.
So yeah, Weird Al is just someone that, I mean, I can always enjoy him. I may not always be in the mood for him, but when I am, it's always enjoyable.
Right. All right, so let's give her another spin real quick. All right, we have MTV.
Oh gosh. Okay, MTV. I remember when MTV used to play videos.
Yeah, remember that, kids?
Yeah, did you know that MTV stood for music television? Did you know that MTV wasn't always 57 different channels? Right. I don't know how many they have now, but I remember it got up to like 4 or 5 at one point. When I remember old MTV, I remember it wasn't all music videos, but I remember some of their shows like Remote Control.
Oh, yes.
That is still is one of my favorite game shows of all time, even though if I watched it now, I would probably, cringe that I liked it. I remember seeing guys like Adam Sandler getting starts on there as like the stud boy. When it came, you go a little later, you would have to mention things like Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, yeah.
Because they did start getting, into more, TV shows and things like that. But, I mean, MTV was just something you go to. I mean, that's where we learned about music. I mean, it was a little biased at the time because they didn't play everything at first because not everyone had music videos back then. But, I mean, other than the radio where you might hear something new at the time, MTV was the place that's like you got to see the bands. You got to, kind of get the full experience of a band. So, those are my earliest memories of MTV. And on a little side note about Beavis and Butthead, we had relatives from Australia come over, and Beavis and Butthead for us, we had seen season after season, and it was still funny, but it kind of lost some of its luster. One of my greatest memories of growing up in high school was when we had relatives come over from Australia, and they were going to see, they saw Beavis and Butthead for the first time. And listening to them laugh at Beavis and Butthead brought back, my love for that cartoon again because, it made it funny again. So, MTV, they introduced a lot to the world. Whether it be like comedians like Adam Sandler or Dennis Leary, they've introduced so much to the world. It's sad that they've become what they've become.
Right.
Because it's one of those kind of, I think their last, when they were really popular last was, to me anyway, even though I kind of fell out of love with the show, would have been whenever they were doing like TRL, which I know that was a little later, maybe, a little over our limit of time there, but that we're talking about. But, MTV before that was something I really liked, but what it became, it was just sad.
Yeah, so like my thoughts, obviously Beavis and Butthead like sits on the forefront for that. I mean, I just watched the crap out of that show. And funnily enough, my favorite part was when they had the music videos and they did their commentary on those. That was golden.
Yeah.
Other big things, Unplugged. I really enjoyed that series.
Oh yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I mean Nirvana, Alice in Chains, those were some of the best ones. Of course, I mean, just the grunge era in general during MTV, like that was like, to me, that was like the peak of my time with MTV. Things like Headbangers Ball and stuff like that. Other game shows, Singled Out. where Chris Hardwick got his start.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good show. But I mean, I really enjoyed MTV when it was, in my time. But I mean, it's sad that it went the way it did. But I look forward to seeing, what other venues can come up with. I mean, I'm glad that YouTube's around to kind of give us music videos again. Albeit, I mean, I don't watch very much music videos. I don't listen to a whole lot of current music, but it's at least a good vehicle to be able to listen and watch some of the old ones. So,
yeah, you mentioned the Unplugged series, and I almost spaced out about those. One of my favorite albums of all time is Alice in Chains Unplugged.
Oh man, it's so good.
I mean, I've bought, I bought multiple copies of that just because, of that show. And I'm not the biggest Nirvana fan, but I love their Unplugged show. And even when they started doing the later Unplugged shows, like a weird one that wasn't terrible, which I was kind of surprised, was like the LL Cool J one. That was just an odd one that, you wouldn't think would be, it wouldn't be great. But, but it was. And also I have to mention about MTV, and this is just going to be the show where I embarrass myself. I had a crush on Martha Quinn. Too.
At least it wasn't Kennedy.
Oh, she's I like strong women, but man, she was a little much for me at that point in my life. So. Yeah, man. Well, that's all I got to really say about MTV. I wish it was what it used to be, but I don't think it could ever get back to what it was.
Right. All right. Time for another spin.
Now, hopefully you can embarrass yourself, and hopefully it's not just me.
All right. Get ready for a broad topic.
All right.
And get ready to show our age. We're talking about cartoons.
Okay.
All right. So I guess my earliest cartoons that I got into that I really remember, I'm going to go with Voltron and Thundercats. Those were big. I remember getting the bigger Voltron set where it's you actually could build it with the separate lions and stuff, and you could actually put the action figures inside of it. And I was 4 years old, so I had the hardest time getting that thing together. So I would have fits that I couldn't get it together. But those were big. Obviously, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean that. I grew up in the heyday of that. I was that age, just a little too old for Power Rangers, so I was right in the Ninja Turtle age. I mean, how could we not talk about Ninja Turtles as a cartoon, but just everything that surrounds them, whether that be some of the video games and stuff like that, or the live action films. The first two. We're not going to talk about the third one. Even the second one's a little iffy, but that first live action movie's pretty good. But yeah, those are some of my big ones. Obviously, Transformers, and the movie, of course, not the live action movies, the animated film.
The only movie.
Yes, let's just talk about that. It's as broad as this topic is. I could go on for ages about cartoons that I watched as a kid. Another thing about cartoons, and again, kids, this shows our age. Back in the day on network television, things like CBS and ABC, you got to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. That's basically when you got to watch cartoons. You got them on Saturday mornings, and you got them a little bit in the morning before school and a little bit after school in the afternoon. You didn't have things like Cartoon Network where you had cartoons all day long. You only had these small windows. And the Saturday morning cartoons, some of the best ones that I remember of those, Captain N the Game Master. I watched the snot out of that one. And then there was and during the afternoons, there was the Super Mario Brothers Super Show with the Legend of Zelda cartoon, which... You know
I
what?
said to wait for Friday for.
Right. Back in the day, though, I mean, looking back at it, it's really hokey. But back then, I mean, that's how you could imagine the characters because, I mean, obviously, 8-bit pixels, This is how you translated it, I guess. So.
Well, I gotta comment on a couple things you said. First of all, I showed my kid the Legend of Zelda cartoon. I had to find it on YouTube because Netflix can't show those episodes for some reason on their Super Mario Bros.
I know. It's annoying.
Really weird because my son just kept saying, I want to watch that, Dad. I'm like, well, for some reason they're skipping them. So we found him on YouTube, and he started to watch them, and he asked me, why does he keep saying, "Excuse me, princess"? And then,
because catchphrases.
Yeah, of course. Why did it have to be that one? Okay, and then another comment I have about Power Rangers. You were the right age for Power Rangers in a way, because like me, you were probably that age where you didn't understand why, but you liked the Pink Ranger.
Oh no, I love yes, but yes, but I will say that I watched it starting out, and even if I would say that I'm too cool for Power Rangers, I was not too cool for Tommy as the Green Ranger and the White Ranger.
I've met Jason David Frank multiple times, and I've interviewed him a couple times. He's one of the coolest guys. If you're a Power Rangers fan and never met him, go meet him, because you'll be an even bigger Power Rangers fan. I like him okay. I watched the first season. That's about all I ever watched. I didn't watch any of the spinoffs, but yeah. A lot of those you mentioned, I would definitely agree with. Applies to me too. There's 4 cartoons that I could really say I attach myself to when it comes to growing up with them. Looney Tunes was big for me.
Oh, right.
And by extension, even though I know it's Hanna-Barbera, anything Hanna-Barbera ever kind of put out there, I'm a big Hong Kong Phooey fan to this day. And that definitely shows my age.
The older Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. The Mystery Inc. isn't that bad because it's actually kind of a continuing story. My son was watching that for a while. Then he got scared of ghost cows and wouldn't watch the rest of it. I understand that, but there was scarier stuff in that show, but ghost cows put him over the edge. But then the other cartoons that I would attach myself to would be G.I. Joe was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Ninja Turtles, which, I know we've mentioned the store Hills on this show before.
Yeah.
I remember I didn't even know what the Ninja Turtle was, and I found the toys at a Hills and was like, these are cool. I want these. And that was the beginning of, I bought the toys first. I didn't see anything of them before that.
Oh.
But the one that I really attached myself the most to is Transformers. I've always just been, I've loved like big robots and things like that. So, I mean, by extension, you could throw in things like Voltron and everything else and Robotech and things like that. But those shows I liked them as a kid, but you understand those shows more as an adult, because the stories make a little more sense. But Transformers, for me, it was a series. I mean, it was like one of the first big animated movies I saw in a theater, seeing the original cartoon. That was the first movie I ever cried at. When Optimus Prime died, man, that hurt. So, but then that movie also taught me a lot about things, that sometimes loss happens, even though they brought him back later.
Yeah.
They didn't bring back any of the other ones that they had to get rid of to bring out new toys. But, and of course you understand that later in life, but at least they made it compelling. I can watch that movie to this day, and it's still, it's not just a nostalgic thing for me. It actually has a good story because, you are invested in these characters. They built up these characters. The voice acting is amazing. I mean, I've admired guys like Frank Welker and Peter Cullen to this day because of shows like that.
Yep.
So yeah, those are ones I would attach myself to. I mean, there's many, many others, but when it comes to the key ones, it's mainly like Looney Tunes and G.I. Joe, Turtles, and Transformers.
Now, and I know you've talked about this one before, and I'm not a big follower of it, but I know you go on about it, and I know it's kind of a sleeper hit with you, but Danger Mouse, was that one of them you said you were?
Yeah, you go back and watch the old ones. I love Danger Mouse, and I will forever love Danger Mouse. That's just it though. I discovered Danger Mouse later in life. I didn't grow up with that as a kid.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Now granted, it was probably in my teen years, closer to end of like high school whenever I discovered Danger Mouse. That being said, the funny thing is the new show that they have on Netflix, I like it better than the original show, because the original show, you can see how the budgeting was.
Right.
You can see the repeated stuff and how they had to cover up mouths and things like that so they wouldn't have to animate them. And the new show, of course, with computers, they can do more with. It's more of a meta. I mean, Danger Mouse has always been a meta cartoon, but nowadays we understand meta more. So the new cartoon is extremely meta, and I've shared it with my kids and they love it too. So that's a rare instance where I would rather watch the new version over an old version.
So moving back to Ninja Turtles real quick. Your favorite turtle, and defend why.
Okay. I always go back and forth on this. I always say I want to be a Leonardo, but I'm a Raphael. I always want to be, the stoic type. I always want to be in control, and I always want to be able to lead. But sometimes I know for a fact that I'm just a hothead, and I get the job done, and I do, as Raphael, you love your family, but sometimes you just got to be on your own. You know what I mean? Yep. So as much as I admire like a Leonardo, I'm definitely a Raphael. But that being said, I do love the fact that those two, when it comes to all four turtles, those two seem to have like the biggest connection to each other.
Right.
Because any medium that they do Ninja Turtles, they always have some kind of rivalry between Leonardo and Raphael, which as a fan of both of them, that works for me. That being said, I love all the turtles in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I want to be a Leo, definitely a Raph.
So in my case, I'm a hard Donnie, and I've got several reasons. Number one, he's a geek. I'm a geek. Number two, he wears purple. Purple's my favorite color. Yes, I'm a dude and I love purple. Get over it. And thirdly, and this is just the dumbest reason, but you know what? It's a good reason anyway. Donnie has the longest reach out of any of the turtles in any of the video games. Oh yeah. So definitely play as Donnie.
Oh yeah. If I'm playing the NES game, I'm definitely Donnie as much as I can. It's funny that I always say I'm a Leo and a Raph guy, but the first two Ninja Turtles I bought were Mikey and Donnie. So,
yeah.
Granted, I think it was the only one that the store had, but still, like I said, I love them all, but I definitely understand why you like Donnie. I mean, because I can see a lot of that character in you as a person, So, and that's just it. We attach ourselves to characters like that. Because we want to identify with them, and I mean we do that with just about anything. So, as much as like I said though, I like all the turtles, but we always attach ourselves to the ones that are most like us.
Right. All right, let's give her another spin and see where we end up. Okay. We've talked enough about this over the last couple weeks, but we're going to talk about toy stores.
Okay. Oh, boy. All right. Hey, toy stores, go listen to the other one. No. When it comes to toy stores, though we talked about like Toys R Us, Toys R Us for both of us, I think, was kind of a rare thing since it wasn't around us.
Right. It was later for me.
Yeah. So, when it comes to toy stores, my biggest memories, and we just talked about in this program, is Hills. Hills was the big toy store we go to, even though I know it wasn't totally a toy store. I considered it a toy store because they had the cheapest toys, and if we ever went, there was a chance I was going to go home with a $3 G.I. Joe guy, Right. And then, of course, we've talked about, and they're making a comeback, even though it's a different company that owns them. The name is coming back, KB Toys.
Yep.
And I'll let you elaborate on them more. KB Toys, that's what I see when I see a toy store, even though it wasn't something as massive as Toys R Us, because they were always in a mall or something like that. It was still, hey, I get to go look at a whole store full of toys. So yeah, for me, I mean, you could throw Kmart and things like that, but those aren't toy stores. Because I would look at the toys anywhere I went. But one other store, I grew up there was a store called Johnson's, where I grew up in Illiopolis, which is as small as it sounds. And no, it's not Indianapolis, which is a question I get a lot. You're from Indianapolis? No, Illiopolis. The store called Johnson's, they would have a row of toys. And so whenever I was young, I would go from my house, take my bike to Johnson's just so I could go look at this row of toys, see if I had enough money to put one on layaway, and yeah, layaway was a thing. And I think it is again, put one on layaway and save up for it. I remember saving up for toys, like Perceptor, the Transformers. They were, it was, wow, I can get a Transformer that turns into a microscope. That doesn't really work that well.
Right.
That's how I would get a lot of my toys growing up, because, I mean, yeah, we go to towns around us, but, being in a small town, if you saw a toy that was really cool, at like a small store, even like that, that was impressive for a little guy like me.
Yep. So, I mean, you mentioned KB. KB is probably the biggest as far as like childhood memory for me for toy stores. Like I said, Toys R Us didn't come around our area until I was almost a teen, whereas KB was there as long as I can remember it, in our local mall and at the mall where my grandparents lived in Iowa. So, I mean, we go to KB all the time. And I mentioned this on my podcast too, but I'm going to talk about it here too anyway. A couple of biggest memories of KB were the candies that they had. I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did before that, but they had some really interesting novelty candies that you can't even get now. I wish they had some available, just because like I'd like to introduce my kids to them, especially my youngest, because he's just like into candy all over the place. And then I remember that you could get Atari 2600 games when I was really like younger. Were super cheap because it was right after the crash, so they were just clearanced like down to like rock bottom prices. So like you could end up getting an Atari 2600 game for like less than $5. Those and some PC games too were pretty cheap, and really marked down. That was one thing about KB, was that their original markup was always high, but when they clearance stuff out, man, they clearanced it out. So I mean, you got to be able to get some stuff for pretty good prices.
Yeah, when it came to markdowns, that's one of my biggest memories of them. I remember, and this was later when I was collecting toys and things like that. And some it was at the end of, the era where I'm playing, and then it transitioned into collecting. I remember always being able to go in there, and there'd be a bin of like X-Men guys, right? And it would be 3 for $10. Or something like that, and it didn't matter what, if they had different looking cases or whatever, you could pick 3 different guys for $10. That was always cool to me. I remember learning, I know the stuff from the video game Crash was cheap, but the like Nintendo games and stuff, I don't ever remember them being cheap in there.
No.
I remember learning that, I guess games are expensive everywhere. Because I think I was always expecting to see, expecting them to be cheaper there, because they, a lot of other stuff was cheaper there. And it's like, nope, games are still whatever. Yep. Games, what was it, like $30 back then for an NES game, maybe 40. I can't remember exactly how much it cost.
That sounds about right.
But yeah, so my best memories of that place was going in, and I'm kind of hoping, and whenever they used to have the outlet store at the outlet mall that's close to us, like Tuscaloosa is maybe an hour away,
about an hour away.
They used to have an outlet store for KB, and you could find a lot of cool deals there. Even after all the KB stores around us closed, they still had that outlet store for a while, so that kind of brought back some memories. But for me, yeah, it was always finding the cool deals on action figures for me, whether I was going to play with them or collect them.
Right. And another thing, not necessarily a brick and mortar store, but when it came to getting toys, a big one for me too was that my grandparents would always have the JCPenney catalog
yeah.
Christmas. Oh man, and that is where like you went to town. You circled what you wanted and put your initials on there, so they knew. Because if you didn't put your initials, you'd end up with something that was one of the other grandkids that they asked for. So you don't want that, you know, especially if you have different tastes.
It's like, I want A1 on page 247. You know, make sure it's page 247. You know, you get the 5 packs of turtles or something like that. I always remember that. That was always cool. Yeah, you almost forget about catalogs. We're definitely getting old, Bill.
Right. Yes. Kids, before there was Amazon and online shopping, they had catalogs.
Amazon was called these big books right here that came out every Christmas.
I mean, these were like textbook size. These things were huge. But I remember, man, okay. All right. I think we can go ahead and give this thing another spin and see where we end up. All right, you know what? We're going to skip this one because we just talked about toy stores, and we don't really need to talk about toys itself. So let's move on to the next one.
I can tell you probably toys for me. You could just copy my cartoon.
It's very much the same.
It's going to be pretty much the same.
All right. I'm excited about this one. All right, so this might be a little bit later for both of us, but, I mean, let's just face it. It was at its best around this time. For me, anyway, and probably for you. Everybody probably thinks this from their kid age and teenage age. But we're going to talk about SNL for a little bit.
Oh, boy. Okay.
My biggest memories of SNL surround the early 90s when you had the cast of Carvey and Myers and Adam Sandler, Chris Farley. I mean, some of the best characters came out of the early 90s. Wayne's World obviously is like the number one that comes to my head. Matt Foley, motivational speaker by Chris Farley. Going to be living in a van down by the river. That was good.
Many consider that the best sketch ever.
Oh yes,
on SNL, and really, I can probably buy that argument.
Yeah, it's either that or something that Will Ferrell did. Maybe the cowbell sketch is pretty good. I don't know. Matt Foley's still probably funnier to me.
Because I don't think they ever revisit. Did they revisit that character?
I think they did it at least twice, but the one that I'm always thinking of is the one. I think it had Alec Baldwin as the dad. No,
yeah, it's where they were talking. I think I don't remember. They were talking.
This
about
is marijuana or whatever.
Yeah, they were talking to the kids about drugs.
Right, and Christina Applegate was like the girl, and David Spade was the kid, the boy.
Yeah, because they made David Spade crack up. He had to cover his face a few times,
right?
Because he was being made to laugh by Chris Farley.
Yeah, that was great. Oh man, Church Lady, obviously Dana Carvey. I'll tell you what, man. There's a guy that could do like so many different great impressions. Yeah, his George Bush Sr. That was great. One of my favorite sketches, and it's only like I've only found like his greatest hits one was one where he was Tom Brokaw, and like he was doing like several takes off of that about Gerald Ford being killed or something, and it's pretty funny after about 5 minutes of it.
Yeah, for me, I go a little bit earlier. Because I'm a little bit older than you. Right. I mean, I won't say I totally remember things like Eddie Murphy on there, but I remember getting to see that stuff, after knowing what SNL was, because, it was about late 80s for me. It was like I started watching SNL a little before guys like Sandler got there. I mean, Dana Carvey was there, Phil Hartman, Kevin Nealon, Jan Hooks. It was around that time, and then of course I admired whenever guys like Adam Sandler and David Spade came in. But then I got to see stuff from like Eddie Murphy doing like Gumby and Buckwheat. Yeah, I don't remember getting to see a ton of stuff from the past other than Eddie Murphy, because I remember
Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, and see, and I wanted to see that stuff because even though I got in trouble for it, me and my brother. We got caught watching Eddie Murphy Raw
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but that actually got me introduced. That kind of introduced me to Eddie Murphy. Even though the stuff on SNL, I mean, he got to be a little risky, but not not Eddie Murphy raw risky. So.
Right.
But yeah, the stuff with me is about the same time as you. The things that really stick out with me, I don't remember when he stopped doing it, but when Dennis Miller did the Weekend Update for the longest time.
Yeah.
And then of course like Kevin Nealon took over.
Yeah.
There was the dark days of Norm Macdonald doing that show. I mean, I love Norm Macdonald in certain things, but he did not belong on that news desk.
No.
And really when I think about sketches, a lot of Phil Hartman sketches stick out with me, and I don't know if it's because he's gone now, but things like Colon Blow really made me laugh because as a kid, I didn't totally understand it. It's like watching Ghostbusters as a kid and an adult. When you watch it as a kid and you don't totally get it, it's kind of funny, but you don't get it.
Right.
Because I didn't know what colon was, but then you become older and you know what that is, and then it makes it really funny. And then one of the ones anytime I think of SNL, the first thing that pops into my mind is when they were doing a thing where they were talking to the director of Soylent Green, and they had this whole thing where they talked about the film, and they had Phil Hartman playing Charlton Heston, and they showed the end. It's people. It's made out of people, and then they talked about how he tried to make other Soylent films. And it was always at the end, Charlton Heston going, it's people. It's made out of people. That one always stuck out with me because it actually made me go and watch that movie. Because I had never seen the movie and I didn't get the sketch and I wanted to understand it. Because the sketch made me laugh, but I didn't understand why. And then it made me go watch that movie, and I liked that movie. So, that one always sticks out with me.
Yep. But yeah, I think SNL, it had its sweet spot in the early 90s. And then, of course, to me, SNL is one of those shows where it's like you get a really good cast and they start working really well together and you get some really good sketches, and then they move on and then a newer cast comes on and they have to get broken in, and it takes a little while, and then they start taking off, and it just kind of it's a vicious cycle, I think, with that show.
Yeah, but I don't, that's just it. Whenever they would, the cast would start demanding a little more money, which understandably they've been there a long time. I mean, because I remember when guys like Sandler and stuff were there, and all of a sudden they pretty much dropped everybody but Tim Meadows,
Right.
and then here's, these people we don't know, and, they brought in guys like, I don't remember the exact timeline, but, all of a sudden, these unknown guys like Will Ferrell are coming in,
Chris Kattan,
yeah,
Rachel Dratch.
And some have made a career, some haven't, and honestly, I mean, there's times that, even nowadays, SNL has made me laugh. They may argue this, but I don't think they ever got back to the prominence that they were when guys like Sandler were there.
Right.
Though they've had some good people go through it, and they still have some good people in it. One of the funniest sketches they've ever done is when Adam Driver was a guest, and they did the undercover boss Kylo Ren thing.
Yeah,
so I mean, they have brilliance here and there. But are the shows as complete as they used to be? No, I don't think they're ever going to get back to that prominence ever again.
Yep. Guess we'll only see. All right, let's give it another spin. Probably do a couple more here.
All right.
All right. We're going to talk about home console video games.
Oh, boy. I'll definitely show my age. Is it me starting this one?
You are starting.
Okay, yeah, Pong. I had Pong. My dad went to an auction and he always came home with big boxes of stuff. There was one time we had a playroom growing up, and there's one time we came home and the room was full of Star Wars toys, right? So he came home from this auction, he had this Pong, and we didn't even, I didn't really know. I mean, I'd played video games at the local store or whatever. They'd have a Robotron or a Donkey Kong or something, but
Right.
So I knew what video games were, but I didn't know. I was like, what's this thing with these twisty paddles, right? So we plug it in. It worked like twice, and then it died. The best part about it was I got an Atari 2600 out of it for so we got an Atari 2600 shortly after that, and so yeah, I had an Atari. I've had game systems. I've always had a game system, something in my house. Whether it went from Atari 2600 to Nintendo to Genesis. My brother had the PlayStation 1. I didn't get that, but
sure.
I bought a PS2, and I got a PS2, that's a little later, past our little time period we're doing. But, I've always been connected to video games. So, yeah, my fondest memory of video gaming as a kid, growing up in a small town, if you could accomplish something big in something like a video game, it was a big deal.
Yep.
I was the second person in Illiopolis to beat Mike Tyson in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. The guy that beat him first was unemployed and got to play video games all the time. He didn't have to. he didn't have to do things like go to school, and things like that. So yeah, it was a big deal that I was able to beat Mike Tyson. I mean, I got a lot. I mean, oddly enough, I wasn't the most, I wasn't the most popular kid, so of course I would, retreat to video games, and they've always been a big part of my life. And, I always like to joke that they're in my kids' DNA, and I'm sure you'd say the same thing, because my kids are into video games pretty big now. I mean, granted, I kind of think everybody is now, but I can see my kid has a love for them like I did. It's not just I'm just playing games to kill time. He loves what he's doing, and for me, yeah, it was. I mean, when it comes to video games like the Atari 2600, I own the E.T. game. I got it that Christmas, the Christmas that it was rushed to completion, and I beat that game. So there, I take pride in the fact that I was able to collect all the pieces of the phone and escape the military and find the little spot in the forest and phone home. So I had a lot of memories of Atari. I love the Atari. Nintendo was probably my baby because there were so many games on there that I fell in love with. I mean, I don't think I played as many games as you did. Because you were into like things like Zelda and probably Metroid and things like that. I never really got to play those games. I always had the odd games like Akari Warriors. We had to pick games that me and my brother could play together
Contra.
A lot. Yeah. Oh, see, I never got to own Contra. Of course, we got to borrow it from a friend and do the Konami code, and I even have a poster with the Konami code on it because that's ingrained in my memory. And it's always fun to see what it'll do to you in a new Konami game, whether it's good or bad, So, yeah, when it comes to video games, they've always been a part of my life, and I can thank my dad's love of auctions for that, I think.
So for me, we had an Atari 2600 as long as I remember being little. In the house. Games on that I remember were the 2600 version of Pac-Man, which interestingly enough, I didn't know any better. I was so young, I didn't know what
I did.
Pac-Man arcade version was. So it wasn't anything until later that I realized that, this is a horrible port of the game. But I had that Frogger, which actually was a really good port on the Atari 2600. But those were big. But of course, the NES was where it really was for me. I remember playing the NES at friends' houses and renting the NES because you could rent consoles back in the day at video stores. And surprisingly enough, I don't even have video stores on this wheel. I don't know why it's not on this wheel, but we'll have to put it on there for another day. But yeah, at the video store, you could rent the games and the consoles. So I rented NES, for a weekend and did that before I owned one. And then, of course, video stores. That was a weekend, excursion all the time, was going to the video store and renting a game every weekend. So that's how I played a lot of mine. I owned, a handful of games, but most of my exposure was from renting every weekend. Because back then you could get a fair way through a game, especially on the NES, over the course of a weekend. But that's it. Obviously, the Super Nintendo was the next step up for me. I didn't own a Genesis until later. I was the Super Nintendo guy, where all the cool kids got the Genesis. You know?
I didn't have to buy one. My brother bought one. So see,
Right.
we had both of them in the house there, smart guy.
Okay. But that's how it was, man. Like, it's like all the cool kids were getting the Sega Genesis with Streets of Rage 2. You know,
I never owned the Streets of Rage games. I don't know
man.
why. Because I don't know. I like those games okay, but I've tried to play them on like the Genesis collection, and it's like
I'm a Final Fight guy.
yeah. See, I'm definitely a Final Fight guy myself. Maybe because I love Capcom games so much.
Right. But yeah, I mean SNES. Of course, I was the different kid though too, because I mean you had kids that were talking about games like Contra and Ninja Gaiden, where I was the kid that was talking about Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, and you know the games that like the nerd kids would sit and play for hours. But just because I was an RPG kid from square one, because I got a copy of Dragon Warrior from my grandparents for Christmas the same year I got the NES, so played the living crap out of that. But yeah, video games, home consoles have been in my blood pretty much since I was a kid, and that's a big part of my life. All right,
let me ask you this. I got one more little thought on this.
No.
When it comes to you brought up the Pac-Man port. I knew I played it. Don't get me wrong, because I owned it and I played it because hey, it's a game.
Sure.
But were you ever around? See, I was always around a family that had a Coleco, right? So of course the Coleco was is kind of a souped up Atari where the games kind of look more like the arcade. So
Donkey Kong looked way better.
So anytime I'd see Donkey Kong or Pac-Man or anything like that where the port wasn't so good on the Atari, I was always a little jealous. I never had a Coleco. Like I said, but I was always happy when I got to go over to this person's house and play it. You know, it and its weird controllers. But yeah, I didn't know if you ever had to deal with that. Maybe that's why you were okay with like the Pac-Man and stuff, because you hadn't seen the Coleco. You know,
right? Well, I didn't know anybody with a ColecoVision really growing up, so it's like I didn't see these until later. Everybody had either a 2600 or you know, by the time I was really playing video games, the NES was already out, and I didn't play a lot of the early 80s arcade games, maybe a little bit here and there, but and arcades is that spoiler alert, that's another category on here, so we'll maybe get to that one, but we'll talk about that as a separate category. Anyway, let's give this one more spin and maybe we'll get one more category in and we'll save the rest for another night.
It's gonna be arcade games, isn't it?
We'll see. Oh, yes, I am excited about this one. Okay. All right, so the category is candies. So rules are we need to talk about stuff that existed then, may still exist now, but like was really kind of at its peak in popularity then. One of the ones that I remember the most in the 80s was a fruit chew. It was like one flavor on the inside, one flavor on the outside, and the name of it was Bonkers. It was kind of like a Starburst candy.
I vaguely remember that one.
And they advertised them in comic books like all the time. I remember that. Those were awesome. I mentioned these in the KB discussion that I had in my last podcast. They had it was Ghostbusters themed, and then they had some other kind later, but it was bubble gum that came out of like a toothpaste tube. Which sounds gross at the time, but as a kid that intrigues you, and I like really enjoyed that, and I remember that. There was that, and then there was a bubble gum that they had. It was in like a milk, like a juice carton, a miniature juice carton, and they were like almost like pebble-sized pieces, and you just put a bunch in your mouth and chew them up. I think they had grape, orange, and like sour apple or something like that, and those were by Tops. And of course there were ones that are still around today, but kind of gained their popularity in like the 80s and 90s. Bubble tape, that kind of became popular with me growing up, and Big League Chew.
Yeah, that was going to be one I mentioned. That was definitely big in my childhood.
And then what was the other one that I was just thinking of? Oh, like Ring Pops. I think those were they kind of hit their popularity like right in the 80s too, but they still have those around too. What are some that you can think of, Gino?
Well, there isn't a lot of odd ones for me, and it's hard for me to really remember that because I mean, if you look at me, you can tell I've had a few candy bars in my life. But I was more traditional when it came to candies. I always grew up with things like Snickers and things like that are still around to this day and will probably never go away. They'll come up with some clever commercial and people will want to buy them again. The oddest one I can remember, and I remember when it became a thing that you shouldn't do it, was candy cigarettes.
Yep, and the the bubblegum cigars.
Yeah, and they would always have like the real companies on them.
Yep.
I remember buying little bags of, and they weren't even like, sometimes they were like real size of cigarettes, and sometimes they were a lot smaller. But they would have like Cool and Marlboro and Camel on them, and I remember thinking back now, it's like, wow, that's a really sick way of getting, kids interested in cigarettes. But really all they were just like sugar sticks, they weren't that good, to be honest.
Right. Do you think it would be enough to get people to not smoke cigarettes when they like, it's like, oh, I'm sticking chalk in my mouth.
It's like, is this what cigarettes taste like? These suck. But yeah, you mentioned Big League Chew. I remember it was a big deal playing summer baseball, and if you had Big League Chew, you were the guy, because everyone wanted some. Just don't buy the grape. That stuff was nasty.
Oh, so I like the grape more than the regular.
The grape stuff always left a nasty taste in my mouth. Yeah, I didn't grow up with a lot of weird candies. I remember, I to this day, I'm a Reese's peanut butter cup guy.
Oh, everybody's a Reese's, unless you're allergic to peanuts.
Well, and then of course, most of us have graduated to eggs or Reese's peanut butter eggs are the best.
Have you ever had the Reese's Big Cup?
Yeah, they're okay.
Man.
I always thought they're a little tough on the outside for me, but that's why I like the eggs, because the whole thing's soft. But candies, I tried a lot of candies. My favorite candy bar of all time is probably, other than like the Reese's egg, is like the Payday. I remember Payday was always big with me, and I remember it was such a weird moment when, we went to the same local store I mentioned earlier in the toy category, and oh my gosh, there's a chocolate covered Payday, that was a weird day for me, So there's things like that, but one weird thing growing up, and I don't think they could even get away with it now. There'd probably be government sanctions all over it, and maybe they still do it. I don't know, because I don't buy cards anymore. Back when you could buy baseball cards, and there was that nasty cardboard stick of gum in there that Lord knows how long it had been in there. but by God, you just found that
you chewed that thing regardless.
Yeah, you just found that Ryan Sandberg card, and you were excited, and you were chewing that gum. So, your brother didn't have that card, you did, and it was a victory, so you chewed the gum, there wasn't a lot of weird ones for me, but definitely a lot of fond memories and pounds to remember when it comes to candy.
Oh, I forgot to mention Pop Rocks too. Those were always kind of a big one too when I grew up. So
I never really got into those. I remember a friend of mine, his parents would get them for him, and I think they're okay. I know they don't do the same effect, but when it comes to like little candies like that, I prefer Nerds.
Yeah, Sweet Tarts.
Yeah, and I still do. Things like, I don't like anything like that, like Sprees, things like that. So. But yeah, there's almost too many candies. It's one of those things where there's almost too many candies to remember. That a lot of them, there hasn't been a ton of fond ones for me, but it's because there's just so many of them that I like, I think.
Right, and I know it's still around today and it's popular anyway, but I always associate Twizzlers with the movie theater because I would always get those when I would go to a movie as a kid and as a teenager. So it's
you know why, right? And I think, and it may be subconscious, but Twizzlers always seemed to be the best deal. Because think about it, they give you a bag of M&Ms and you were paying, we'll say $3 for a bag of M&Ms. Well, that $3 of Twizzlers gave you twice the candy. It may not have been chocolate, but hey,
you made it through most of the movie with that too, which was nice. So
and I kind of you kind of realize that later in life. And I remember going to a movie like with a group of people, and I remember the person that was there, like the adult that was there, was like, "Well, we're gonna get these because they'll basically more cost effective for what you're getting." So
right. And I was always that weird kid too, and I don't know, probably everybody's done it, but I was the kid who like bit off both ends and then like stuck it in the drink and drank through the Twizzler every once in a while.
Oh, a Twizzler straw? No, man, you're not weird. that's as normal as it gets. There ain't nothing like sucking sugar water through a sugar hose.
All right. Well,
we probably got time for one more.
Okay, let's do one more. All right, I'm gonna give it a spin. And I think are you up first? Yeah, you're up first.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, get ready. Oh, here it is. Arcades.
Oh boy, arcade stories. Oh boy, arcades. For me, the earliest experience of an arcade was 2 or 3 games at the local store. Growing up in a small town. And really, that's my first exposure to video games, as we talked about earlier. But whenever I would get to come to Decatur and go to, say, like, Showbiz Pizza Place.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I didn't know what a Chuck E. Cheese was because we never went to the town that had that for the longest time. It was always Showbiz, which I believe, I can't remember which way it goes. Either Showbiz Company bought Chuck E. Cheese or Chuck E. Cheese bought, I think it's Showbiz bought Chuck E. Cheese.
Showbiz bought Chuck E. Cheese and took the Chuck E. Cheese name.
Right, okay, so that's how that worked.
Yep.
So yeah, Showbiz is basically a Chuck E. Cheese with different characters. So there was that, and then also there was a place, my fondest memory, there was a place called the Northgate Mall.
Oh my
in the
goodness.
town we live in.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a crappy arcade. But boy, do I have some fond memories there, because we would go there. We would go there to shop at Venture, which I don't know if a lot of people are going to remember.
That'll show our age too, man.
Because I mean, every now and then you'll see a store with those white and black stripes, and no one knows what it is, but we did.
Yeah.
Because I do. We get to do a lot of toy shopping there too, or at least looking. But it would be connected to our barber shop, to a movie theater I went to the whole time.
Like 2 or 3 screens.
Yeah, I believe it had 4. It had 2 on each side. Because that's where I got to see Jurassic Park, and that's where I cried the first time watching Transformers the movie. But also, it was attached. The hallways had an arcade, and even to whenever I finally got my license and could go to Decatur by myself, that arcade was still there for a little bit. And I remember going in there, and I learned some harsh lessons in life when it came to arcades, especially when someone that was good at video games that worked there, that had friends there, say you beat their friend in a game, well, they would play you for free, beat you, and let their friend back on the game. There was garbage like that. Some of my first memories of that place, it's the first place I ever played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game.
Oh, yes.
I remember hearing stories of this amazing Turtles game because my brother was able to drive there at the time, but I couldn't. He could go there with his friends, but I couldn't, and I'd have to hear stories about how amazing this game is. There was also an arcade at another strip mall called Brentwood Village, where I played Street Fighter for the first time, the original Street Fighter, not knowing what down to forward and punch was, because you had to know that to beat the game, but they didn't explain that. They just wanted to get your quarters.
Yep.
That's how I learned about the heartbreak of Smash TV. How apparently that game doesn't have a real finish to it because the game developers never thought anyone would get there. So yeah, arcades for me, I learned a lot. Especially when it came to heartbreak in video games, because, man, when you ran out of quarters and you almost beat that game.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I do remember that if you could go to an arcade with $5, you know, you'd get 25 tokens. And usually that was enough to beat a game, you know, depending on what it was. So, yeah, arcades for me, it was always something I loved going to. And a little side note about the kid or the guy that worked at the arcade and would beat me so his friend could get back on. I got my revenge later on in life when I got really good at X-Men versus Street Fighter. Because at the Malls arcade, I was destroying people at that game, and he come in thinking he was going to beat me. And I remember him because he had this ugly straight mullet with one of those mustaches that barely fill out. You know, kind of like that Hick character on The Simpsons. Okay. You know what I mean? He kind of looked like that. And he came in there thinking he was going to run that machine, and I put the beating on him that he will forever remember, because he walked away, and I'm not kidding, walked away from that machine with his head hung low, and he looked like he was going to cry. Thank you, Ryu and Gambit, the tag team of the century with their 47-hit super combo. You put the smackdown on that boy and made my past just a little better.
Yeah. My memories of arcades, just like you, Showbiz was probably like where I started out. I remember more of like the like little rides and stuff there, because I was like a toddler when Showbiz was around. So that's most of my memories of Showbiz and the animatronics. Biggest memories of arcades for me, of course, the one that was in the mall here in town. I'd play there every so often, but the one that I remember the most was it was in Aladdin's Castle in Marshalltown, Iowa, at the mall where my grandparents lived, and we would play there like crazy all the time, because my grandparents, they would spoil me. They'd be like, give me like $5, go in there, get that 25 tokens. I remember specifically one of the biggest memories was me and my brother took each $5 and we played The Simpsons, and we got all the way to the final boss, to Mr. Burns, and we ran out of quarters. We ran out of tokens, and there was no getting back. So like I didn't beat that until later on an emulator. There was that one. Obviously, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Turtles in Time, both really great. Beat 'em ups were like my favorite. And one of my personal favorites was D&D Tower of Doom by Capcom, because it was like, oh, let's mix a beat 'em up with RPG elements, and I was sold, and I was like, I'm in. So this was really good. It's funny that arcades, I was more of a home console guy growing up, but I mean, there were still vivid memories of arcades, up to the point, I mean, even now I still enjoy getting in front of an actual cabinet and playing every once in a while. There's just that feeling of nostalgia that you kind of get, and I do enjoy that. I'm just sad that, you know, arcades aren't what they used to be. I mean, most arcades are kind of just like a hall full of like gigantic mobile games now, pretty much, instead of anything else. And funnily enough, if I go to like a Dave and Buster's or something like that, I find myself playing more ticket games than the actual arcade games, just because I feel like I'm actually getting something out of the money that I spent, rather than, you know, playing in an arcade game that I could play on an emulator somewhere else, which is kind of wrong, but I'd rather do that anyway and kind of win something.
Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate that the arcades have became, you know, like a thing you have to like travel for. I mean, yeah, we've got a couple little arcades around where we're at, and they're fine, you know. I mean, you know, we got the pizza place Garcia's that you can go, and if you eat, you can play the arcade games they got there. Funny enough, they have that Nintendo hooked up there now, and my son would rather just play that Nintendo than play the arcade games. Though I was pretty proud that my other son, when I took him there the other day, me and my other son played Jungle King, you know, pretty much the whole time, you know, because it was simplistic enough for him to kind of to understand. But yeah, if you want to go to a real arcade, you got to go to like a bigger city now.
Yep.
You know, I mean, my son and I, and hopefully he won't get to listen to this. So, you know, me and him, I'm taking him for his birthday to a place called Galloping Ghosts.
Oh, see, I want to go there sometime too.
Yeah, we're going to make a trip out of it for his birthday, see that, and then go to Medieval Times. And he's going, and, you know, you go there, you pay like $20 and can play all day, you know. You know, that I like that model better than say like a Dave and Buster's where you have to like charge up a card. You know, I mean, though I'm fine with it. And there's places like GameWorks that are like the same thing. But like I said, you got to go to like Chicago or St. Louis or something like that. And I mean, there's not a place that I can think of other than like Chuck E. Cheese, which they've got some okay games there. And
they're not what they used to be. You know,
they have the occasional new cool game. My son and I played through like some pirate shooter game that was fun, and they have like a Batman driving game that was really cool, and like arcade Mario Kart, which was pretty interesting. But but really, I mean, yeah, a lot of that's ticket games and stuff, which I think are okay, but. You know, when I play an arcade game, I want to play like Street Fighter or something like that, you know, and that's just I'm not surprised that they're kind of not the thing anymore, especially with the popularity of home consoles and how big and nice TVs are now and how cool like game systems got, but it's still kind of sad that it's not a thing anymore.
Right. Well, arcades were kind of where you went to showcase better technology. I mean, home consoles were not as powerful as arcade machines, you know, back when we were growing up, and then eventually home consoles caught up, and there's not as much incentive to go to an arcade. You know, you weren't getting that better experience.
Yeah, you know, and the only reason like guys like me and you want to go is just for that old school feel, you know, and you know, even though our kids enjoy it too, it's not like, well, we have to go there. You know, they're fine with going there. They like going there, but they're just as fine sitting at home playing on their Xbox or whatever.
Right.
And you know, in a way, that's not a terrible thing. That being said, for that's why I like watching like competition films about video games and stuff like King of Kong and stuff like that, because you get to see more of an aspect of what the arcade, you know, used to be. Because I mean, though I've never been in any big like video game playing like that, like say in those movies, I mean, I've had many you know, in arcade like Street Fighter 2 tournaments and things like that, which by the way I used to be really good at. I probably get my clock clean now, but you know, back in the day I used to do pretty well. But you know, that's what arcades used to be to me. They're, you know, and they still have their core groups that still do this kind of thing, but unfortunately it's not what it used to be. It never was going to survive with the way home consoles became like the thing.
Right. I know. You know, I like the nostalgic feel of the arcades. And just to close off, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I liked about arcades was just that you got that social aspect of arcades. You know, there was some fun when you could stand next to somebody playing a co-op game like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and feel like you really accomplished something with your buddy when you got, you know, all the way through it. So
yeah, you know, it's, to me, I love that too, but you know, now people, well, at least they think they're getting the same thing over like Xbox Live.
Not the same.
You know, I'm just saying they think that,
right.
You know, I don't ever remember being called every expletive in the book, standing next to someone, at least unless I was beating them, I got called a few names. But, you know, it was never like.
But the difference was you didn't do that then because, I mean, when you were right next to him, guess what? You were likely to get, you know.
Well, it's like, sure, you can call me that, but I can punch you in the face.
Yeah, right.
You're not anonymous over a headset, are you? So,
right.
Yeah, that's all about all I got to say about arcades.
No, Gino, I really enjoyed doing this game. I think we got quite a few categories left, so we could do this again another week sometime too. So.
Oh, and I'm sure there's more categories out there. Yeah, I'd definitely do this again. I had a good time.
All right, man. You want to start plugging the channels?
Yeah, I have the YouTube channel, The Reel Geno. That's ReelGeno. I mostly do movie reviews. I've also been doing a little bit of Let's Plays in a segment called Geno's Bad at Games. I just finished up Max Payne 3. I'm going to be starting up my next one soon whenever I got time to play it. I got a few ideas of what I'm going to do. I also do a podcast called Get on the Mic every week. So if you like this podcast, chances are you already listened to it, but if you haven't listened to it, go ahead and check that out. And also I'm going to be teasing on that program this week. I just did a review with Brad Jones, the Cinema Snob. We're going to be talking about a movie called Muppet Guys Talking, which is talking about the people that were behind the scenes. It's Frank Oz and a few others that were behind the scenes of, say, like Sesame Street and The Muppet Show. So I'll be having a preview of that. So if you like stuff like that, go to The Reel Geno. That's ReelGeno.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that you're doing all that stuff with Brad. As for my channel, you can find me at I'm just HeiseNerd, HeiseNerd. Look it up on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/HeiseNerd1. And on there I'm doing Let's Plays, some live streams, and of course I have my own program, HeiseNerd Speaks, that happens every week toward the weekend. And also, Geno will be telling us a little bit about the DNA Digital Network.
Yeah, I want to remind everyone that now not only you'll be able to see or listen to this program and our other programs on YouTube, you'll be able to listen to them on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and other places podcasts are available thanks to the DNA Digital Network. So now you'll be able to listen to these programs on your favorite audio device. For more details, check out DNADigitalNetwork.com.
All right, I am HeiseNerd, and signing us off on behalf of The Reel Geno. Thanks for listening to the GB3 Podcast. We'll be catching you all in a couple weeks with a new topic. Have a great night.
Later.